Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again to another edition of Salmon Theory Talks. My name is Rob Streitinho. I am the founder of strategy studio Salmon Labs, and I publish the newsletter Salmon Theory, and which is now also a video interview series because I really fucking like salmon. Don't ask me questions. Today I have John Hills, VP of Marketing at Crowdcube, with me. And John, I'm going to jump straight into our first question. How would you describe your job to someone outside of your industry?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the intro, Rob, and thanks for having me. First of all, I'll describe marketing to someone outside the industry, by which I mean, like, how would I describe what I do to my mum? And then we'll go into a little bit more detail about what I actually do at Crowdcube. I work in marketing. A lot of people think that means either just making things look pretty, painting by numbers. I think marketing is all about trying to persuade people. So, crafting messages that resonate, things that inspire, things that motivate action. It's not just selling products, selling ideas, selling emotions, or sell the whole, not the drill. Solutions to problems people maybe don't even realize that they have. You try and make the banal memorable, and you try and have fun while doing it. I think that's the most important thing. On a more practical level, yes, I work at Crowdcube. We're Europe's largest equity crowdfunding platform. And basically what that means is that we connect companies looking to raise money with people that want to invest in them. So as a funding marketplace, we have a supply side and a demand side. The supply side is people wanting to raise money for their business, and the demand is the people that want to invest in them. Now, you always have this chicken and egg problem of if you do build up one side to nurture the other one, or do you build up the other side to build the first one? Your marketplace dynamics dictate that you build supply and then you convert demand off of it. So if you're Uber, you want a load of drivers before anyone's going to create an account and hail a ride. It won't work the other way around. If you're Airbnb, there is no way that you are going to create an account. You're going to go through all the trouble of proving who you are if there's not a property that you want to rent or to stay in. So for us, you're not going to go through all of the regulations and requirements that we have for a user. We're regulated by the FCA in the UK and the CNMV in Europe if there's not a business that you want to invest in. So the main way that we build out our business is we've got demand gen and demand capture on what you might call the B2B side. So we work very closely with our sales team and our commercial team to get businesses on the platform, what and why you do equity crowdfunding. And then on the B2C side, the demand side, it's about basically educating and informing people about what private market investing is and why they should do it. And the beauty of that from a marketing perspective, if you have a really large company that does a round, they will bring their user base with them and they have to create a Crowdcube account to do the investment. So a lot of our work, or the clever things we do, is how we get them to do that second investment. The Facebook player visit 10 friends in 7 days or something like that. So basically that's what we do. We build up supply and we convert demand from the marketing side. And we have fun doing it, obviously.
It's interesting what you said about first building up the supply and only then the demand, because it feels counter to how a lot of people these days would say, oh, you can probably prototype a product, see if there's demand for it, and only then manufacture it. It feels like it's quite backwards to that sort of more consumer side of things. Which I never really thought about it that way, but it makes total sense, right? Because otherwise, what am I investing in if there's no businesses to invest in?
Totally. And you go to a wider, higher part of the funnel. If I'm trying to say to you, you're not familiar with investing, but why not come and learn about what private market investing is? You're much earlier in your journey before ready to make an investment because it's not something you want to convert on. And then all of a sudden we would be in the financial education space, which is super competitive.
Yes.
There are companies that do it really well. So we've kind of gone from the other side. You can argue both ways, as you say, but we've picked the supply route.
Yeah, it's probably also like a wiser way of spending your marketing money, because otherwise you're just advertising an entire category of which you are currently. I mean, I know you mentioned you're the largest crowdfunding platform, but at the same time, depending on how you split your category, you might be doing a whole much wider category job that doesn't necessarily benefit you, right? Before you know it, you're teaching people about investing and they go, oh, great, I'm just going to invest in Vanguard then. And you go, oh, no, that's not what we wanted you to do. We wanted you to go private markets, not
exactly
public.
What happens.
Yeah. John, what should I know about your history to understand who you are today?
That's a good question. I grew up in a lot of different places. So as a kid, I grew up a little bit in Brazil, Algeria, France, mainly Spain. I lived and worked in Latin America for a couple of years. I lived in Helsinki for 5 years. My partner's Finnish. I was in Toronto for 3 years. I've been back in London for the last 3 years. Why do I mention that? I think it's a really diverse and unique set of experiences that I was fortunate enough to enjoy. I met some amazing people, had some amazing times. But I think most importantly, it helped me to be humble when I saw how many different types of things and ways of doing things there are. And it helped me understand my place in the world. I think that's something that maybe help you place who I am as a person, I guess. I'm thankful for all of that. And I think I'm all the better for it. So I don't know, bit of a loose answer perhaps, but that's what I got for you.
May I? No, it's not a loose answer at all. I mean, I'm an immigrant in the UK, and definitely moving countries was one of the most. It came with a lot of emotional baggage because of the way that happened to me, and like I moved having not really processed some grief back then, whatever, and it just became quite tough. But at the same time, I look back and I go, it opens your mind in ways that are very, very hard to describe. When I go back home to Portugal, I notice that a lot of things haven't changed, and I am thankful for that. But at the same time, there's part of me that goes, "Oh God, we kind of it kind of felt like it was stuck in these ways for all these years." Whereas my mind has expanded to different places because I've seen things in the UK, in London, etc. that frankly people don't think of back home. And obviously, there's pros and cons to both of them, but I don't think I would necessarily be as, maybe I'd be more content, but I wouldn't feel as fulfilled knowing that my reality is all there is. And I feel like if you don't change countries, it's very easy to fall onto that. Maybe if you travel a lot, but even then, traveling and living, very different things.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head
So yeah,
there. There's places that are great to visit for a weekend, but it's very different to live in those, kind of them. And you're right. Maybe I forgot that those places changed me a lot, along the way. As you say, if you come back to where you're from and you notice that certain things haven't changed, it's probably you that's changed. I quite like the quote. I forget who
yes,
it's from, but it's kind of the end of your traveling is to go back to your start point and know it for the first time, which I think is a little bit what you said,
yes,
kind of you go back and it's the buildings haven't changed, maybe the people haven't, but you see it differently. And I love that. I think it's great.
yes. Out of those various locations, which ones feel like home to you the most?
That's a tough one. I spent most of my childhood in Spain, so that has a really special place in my heart. Like, in my mind, I mean, we're in the UK, it's great, it's raining. In my mind, it wasn't, but it was always sunny there. It was 30 degrees. You had to the pool or the beach, kind of. That was just, I think everyone's childhood, if you have a good childhood, it's kind of like a utopian throwback. So that always feels like home. And then it's the people, not the places. So, kind of my parents are back in the UK now in the middle of the countryside. So in some way, that's a little bit of a home, but it's because they're there and they're no longer there. It won't feel like home anymore, I guess. So yeah, I mean, ultimately probably England, but Spain is a close second for sure.
Nice. May I ask why you moved around so much? Was it because parents' jobs or different reason?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a kid, it's my dad's job. So yeah, he's an electrical engineer that worked on cement factories. So his job was to kind of project manage and build them. So obviously he moves where a cement factory is needed. And then as I got older, I guess I enjoyed it and kind of that was part of my way of life. So I actively sought it out. So now I went to Latin America to teach English. When you're a native English speaker, it's an opportunity that's usually open to you. It's a finite one. I don't think you'd want to do it forever, but when you're young and you have no commitments, it's a great way to see the world, right? So yeah, first just I guess through family and then through choice. It's something I enjoy doing.
And I guess also the fact you were exposed to that variety of countries and therefore business realities, it probably also makes you in an interesting position when you're dealing with a European multi-market kind of role where you probably are I mean, I don't know how much you deal directly with the businesses looking to invest through Crowdcube, but it probably doesn't hurt that you know some nuances about business in a Spanish and Southern European economy versus, for example, someone based in Norway, because you understand implicitly that there are certain cultural things that are different between one and the other.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. It's actually a really important point, specifically for doing business. We cover all of Europe, so we have our European team is predominantly based in Paris, but we cover all of Europe. And you're exactly right. The way you do business in France is very different to how you do it in the UK. The way you do it in Spain and Portugal is again quite different. And what you need to do to kind of get a meeting with people or to have a discussion with them is quite different to how we do it here. And as you touched on, Nordic countries, they even within Nordic countries, in Sweden, they have the concept of discussing stuff and consensus building, which is great, for moving large projects forward. And in Finland, they're much more direct. They're very economical with their language. So if they say no, it shouldn't be taken rudely. It's just kind of, they'll get to the point and say, well, this isn't a good fit. Thanks, bye. And you know how it is in England, we talk around things sometimes as well. So yeah, having that background really helps understanding commercial dynamics and how they're different, and sales cycles and marketing as well, for sure.
Yeah. How would you describe business in Spain? And you mentioned Portugal as well. I don't know if you have views on Portugal, because I'm just curious about, like, being Portuguese, we have our own biases around what the Spanish are like, much like, I mean, I don't think the Spanish think about the Portuguese as much as the Portuguese think about the Spanish. I think it's a bit of a small man syndrome going on there. But I'm curious, just looking at it from the outside in, how would you describe how business is conducted in Spain, and if you have views in Portugal?
Well, I should preface it by saying most of my time in Spain, I was there as a kid, so kind of I didn't, see that much side of it. It's more from having worked at Crowdcube and dealing with sort of our colleagues and our businesses there. I would say that a lot of business is built on trust, in the sense that if you want to have a business meeting with someone, you probably go out for lunch with them. You get to know them a little bit before you even start to talk about business. Okay, it's a little bit more transactional. You want to raise the money, I'm able to help you raise the money. Let's talk. Half an hour discovery call. Are you in or are you out? In Spain, it's probably a slightly longer cycle to get to know those people. But once you do, it's a bit more of an intimate thing. The business and the personal side cross over a little bit. The UK is a bit more clinical. And does that map with your interpretation of Spain, and how's Portugal different?
I definitely get the sense that Latin countries blend things much more seamlessly, right? So one saying we'd always have is that every deal is brokered by the lunch table in Portugal. It's like, if you're going to have a meeting, you're meeting at the restaurant. It's strange to book a meeting room to have a meeting. It's like, no, we're going to go to my favorite local restaurant and I'm going to buy you lunch and I'm going to introduce you to the owner because I've known him for 10 years. If you can do all that, it's great chemistry building. And obviously, I don't know, I feel like there's always a hidden factor of, is this person good to have a bite and a drink with before I even consider getting into business with them? Because, it's almost like I'm going to need to endure them in probably very hard circumstances. So let's see if they're actually decent to hang out with in the first place. That's my read of it. So I think it does track. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that though. I mean, there's good and bad to both, but here's much more clinical, isn't it? Like, quick meal deal and egg sandwich. Let's go. Lunch is more sort of functional.
Yeah. It is. I mean, it is something I'm kind of trying to assimilate now that I kind of, since the beginning of this year, I've started working independently as well. But trying to find that line between, like, when do you talk business versus when you just catch up is interesting. It definitely feels like there's a spectrum between, like, Southern European countries. The socializing part of it is very important. Then you have London, maybe somewhere in the middle. And then if I look at, for example, a place like New York, the feeling I have is that it's like London, but 20% more intense. It's like, right, what the fuck are we doing here? And you go, okay, cool. Yeah, let's talk business, which is fine. It's just knowing those different contexts really helps, because otherwise, it's easy to assume that the way things are done in Spain is the way you've always done them, which goes back to your point. You understand that you never assume anything about how people like to do business or how they see the world, right? Which feels important in quite divisive times.
Yeah, I agree.
What's something you deeply believe but may never be able to prove?
I think work-wise. So one is perhaps sort of the power of long-term branding efforts to CFOs. It's something I work hard to show.
Never heard of that one. Never heard of that one. Tell me more.
It probably tells you more about me and my internal marketing abilities, but kind of there's a lot of good use cases, as you all know, of companies that have got long-term branding right, and the benefits that you can reap from that. There's examples of companies that have got it wrong and how they've suffered from that. Now, there's a big asterisk or caveat in here that most companies are not Apple or Nike or On Running or whoever you want to pick, right? And there's so many factors that go into it. That said, I deeply believe in the power of brands. I wouldn't work in marketing if I didn't. I've yet to nail my formula for explaining that in different contexts to different CFOs, or let's say people who are perhaps more analytically minded, and the challenges you might get from that.
Yes.
I've yet to nail down a way or a 2-sentence mic drop answer to that hasn't been on some level challenged. So fundamentally believe it. I just struggle to prove it.
Yes. Well, you're probably in a very difficult playing field because you are, after all, in a private market kind of company where I imagine it over-indexes on the analytical side and not so much on the softer kind of creative side. That might be a generalization, but I suspect that the product and service you fundamentally sell is a function of the types of people that are in the company, because otherwise they just wouldn't be as good as they are at selling that thing. But it comes with its drawbacks for sure. So I was going to ask, like, if you've had any, like, I mean, I'm sure you've had victories in that, but like any lessons for either other VPs of marketing or just someone who's working with marketers and is trying to give them the ammo they need to make those cases internally. Any like lessons you've maybe learned in the last 12 months on things you've either done well or things you had done better? You wish you had done better?
One learning that we take in the marketing team, one of our mantras is do less, do better. So there's always a temptation, particularly in the digital marketing world, and this isn't a Crowdcube specific thing, but you get asked, why aren't we using this channel? Or I've seen this person doing this, or kind of, this is working really well. Why aren't we trying that? What's going on with this? And we take, the do less, do better approach. And part of do better is the market internally. So don't assume that every other department or function knows, or to a degree cares, what you're doing. Put yourself in their shoes. You don't want to be that person who's updating all the time saying, just want to let you know that I've been doing some work. Everyone's working. We trust all our colleagues are working super hard. But if they don't understand, like, take them on the journey. If they don't understand what you're doing and why and what the impact is, and if you don't keep repeating it to them, it's going to be really hard for them to understand. And, I've learned that the hard way with certain marketing things I've done over the years at different companies, and I haven't spent as much time as I should explaining that internally. It's really hard for people to understand, and that partly comes from wanting to do too much stuff, because it is, there's so many things out there and so many examples of companies doing things really well that you want to get inspired from, or you want to borrow or take stuff from. But one way we've tried to sort of address the value of marketing is doing less stuff and doing it better. One concrete example is really cutting down on the number of social channels that we have. So we used to have the big four. I mean, this predates TikTok really taking off. So we had X, we had Instagram, we had Facebook, we had LinkedIn. And each of those channels, you could argue, requires its own specific approach. Or if not its own approach, it's its own specific way of kind of preparing and editing the content you put on it, in content on all four platforms. And by putting in an average level of effort in, we were getting an average results. So again, do less, do better. We had to think about what would it take for us to do less channels and how would we do it? Okay, so where's our target audience? Our target audience is predominantly on the supply side. Which one of those channels are founders mainly using when they want to find out about things about work? LinkedIn, no brainer, pretty straightforward. Okay, we have a database of nearly 2 million people on our investor database. We did some analysis to understand the different types of groups of people, their need states, why they invest, how they do it. We've got a kind of Pareto law effect going on where 80% of the investments come from the top 20% of that base. Not exactly, but more or less. Again, that top 20% of people, what's the main channel they're going on to look for investment opportunities? Okay, it's either LinkedIn or it's Twitter. Sweet spot of the two is LinkedIn. So we slowly scaled back the other platforms and doubled down on LinkedIn. But again, within LinkedIn, it wasn't a case of posting all day, every day. It was creating a scalable, automated process of consistently doing 3 pieces of content a week, breaking that down into social proofs, industry insights, anything else that we want to do. This is over like a good 6-9 month period, by the way. And then how do we prove this internally? So we start to track our competitors who are larger than us. They're more established. We're talking about private markets in general. We start to track how often they post, engagement rate, follower growth. And sure enough, by doing less and by doing it better, we start to go up from like number 8 or number 9, number 5, number 6. Okay, cool. Motivating, working. We can show some discipline. And last month we got up to number 1. We don't hold it all the time. But it's a very nice way for us to go internally and say, look, we're not saying that LinkedIn is the absolute only way that we bring business or value to Crowdcube. But what we have done is we've really doubled down on that channel, and you can see that we're outperforming competitors who are more established. They've got a bigger budget. They've got more people working on it. We're just showing do less, do better. And again, it's just having a few key things that you can talk about like that, and everyone in the marketing team being really clear on them. So you're saying a consistent message.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a few things that makes me think of. One is it's almost like your role as an internal propagandist. It's like, right, this is broadly what we should keep reminding people. So that's one thing. The other thing is there's probably an interesting parallel between like all the research we see from System1 where ads barely wear in, let alone wear out. It's like an internal wear in that you need to constantly need. And there's actually a research that was done a few years ago where it was like, you got to repeat the same message like 6 times internally for people to understand what you're saying. And that was from an executive's perspective, let alone someone who might be middle management or something. So reach and frequency is also an internal game, I suppose, is what I'm saying. But and the other thing as well is I think so. I've worked a fair amount of years with social and content, and I really like how you blended like commercial data with what you then produce from a content perspective, because that level of alignment is rare, but it's how it should be, right? It's like what do these people need from us, and how do we serve them in a way that's native to these channels, etc. One question I have for you, because I'm a bit of a nerd about measurement and stuff. Do you then have ways of seeing when people go to Crowdcube? If, like, for example, do you ask them where have you last heard from us, etc., so you can kind of see if the share of some of these channels is going up relative to others, or how do you connect those dots if you do?
We have a 2-pronged approach, which kind of they kind of contradict each other a little bit. When I first started to look at it, I thought to myself, social platforms, this is organic, we're not talking about paid. Social platforms monetize on attention. So they're not going to reward us for sending people off the platform. Ergo, we can UTM tag all these links. I bet you hand on heart that you'll get maximum 1 or 2 hits a week, and they're probably us testing stuff. Not because your content's bad, but the journey here is no one goes on Crowdcube, on social, and is like, you know what? I'm off to kind of check out Crowdcube and do an application. It's more they discover
what I really want is to read a blog post elsewhere. Yeah.
Exactly right. And so the first thing I did was kill that off, and I went like, it's a bit of a fool's errand, because it's not, you haven't done the wrong content, but it's not what people do. Like, think of your own behavior. Usually what happens, if you're like, Salmon Theory Labs has got some really cool content, I'm going to follow them on LinkedIn. So it's about being visible and discoverable on LinkedIn. Yes. And I've got a point on that I'll come back to in a second. But in terms of tracking, yes. The other thing we did in parallel, so when you think about the type of companies we work with, we have your kind of the massive names that you all have heard of before that come to us with a huge community. They're the names that we're known for. Of course, they don't apply to us. We go out and hunt them, or it's through a referral occasionally. But most of the inbound things that we get are a lot lower down the funnel in terms of business maturity. So they're typically around Series A size. And that's entirely normal. It's to be expected, normal business dynamics. So we have an inbound form on our site. First thing I did when I joined the company is I fought tooth and nail to get a how did you hear about us form put on that inbound form. Like I didn't need a drop down, which ended up having 18 different options, just like I heard from Mildred at the market on Wednesday. Just put free text. Let's be smart. We can use AI to analyze it on a weekly basis. And yes, so there, what we have there is I check it weekly, but I do trend more on a quarterly basis. And I can say, like, where did these people find us? So, of course, search is a big one. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, ChatGPT has started to appear. But to go back to your answer, about 10% of inbound comes from LinkedIn and social now. So you combine that with the kind of the competitor stuff and the other metrics that you're looking at, and you start to see it's gone up a little bit. It hasn't exploded, but then it's quite easy for us to say about 10% of our deals come in through leads. Those leads convert at X rate into ops. Those ops sign at this percentage. There's a dotted line to revenue. We're not saying I post on LinkedIn, ergo, just made you several $100,000 of business. Absolutely not. But it's contributing. The other thing that was really interesting about LinkedIn, exactly. The other interesting thing was I challenged the team and said, it goes back to your point about referral traffic. I said, we should think about LinkedIn a little bit like the Google ecosystem. So it's not cause and effect that we post on the Crowdcube page and we get a load of stuff. what we should look to do is piggyback on all the touch points that we have. So we get activating our employees. Easy to say, hard to do. And, they should post about what they want to do. But we also have all of the companies that raise on our platform, right? Like we've got these kind of hubs and spokes. And so if you've got a company that's super active on LinkedIn, how are we facilitating that they post? Not because we can ever track that back, but if we've still got our orange logo on there, we're still winning. So that's another thing that we took, going back to the attribution base. In short, my answer was we can't measure it, but there's leading metrics I can use to tell you the story of how that works. And then the other one, to your point about a blog, is just like you flip the Pareto law. If I see that we spent 20% of the time creating content, you should be spending 80% of the rest of it distributing it. Like it's usually the reverse, right? You write a magnus opus post, you don't have organic visibility, you publish it, and then you forget about it. And you're like, wait, so if you spent 2 days, or if you spent 1 day writing that, you should have 4 days worth of planning to promote it because it's an attention economy, right? So it's kind of how we did it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm condensing and simplifying and painting a rosy picture, but that's how we tried to do it.
It's very useful to hear you say that. And I suppose for people to keep repeating it, because even if it's in simplified form, but it's useful principles. Because the amount of times, like I remember working with like companies that were, to say the least, very resource poor. They're charities. They have no marketing budget. And I was just like, look, what you should do is you should take all the things that your founder says to you on a given day, because that's your internal philosophy, that's your internal mantra, that's like what your business is about. You should capture that and then just keep rinsing and repeating through different formats. You're not saying new things, you're just reminding people of the things that have already been said, because I guarantee you that you are reaching a very, very tiny proportion of people who, not even who donate, but who even follow you. Yeah, organic reach is kind of a joke. At the very least, you're reducing your research time and you're maximizing your production and distribution time, because you don't need to find new messaging. Just say what your founder says, because you're a founder-led company. But for some reason, the industry goes, no, we need to like find new things to say. And I go, maybe you don't. Maybe you just need to find new ways of saying the same things over and over and over again. And I know it seems boring, but it's only boring for us. Everyone else kind of doesn't even register.
And as you said, if a post worked really well, post it again in 3 months. Like if it worked well the first time, the odds of like some people will see it again. That took me a while to land that point with just in general. I was saying, the shelf life of a post, the worst thing that happens is no one cares. A bit of debate is okay. Yeah. Let's not get drawn into keyboard warriors or kind of quasi trolls who want the argument, especially in the investing world. Can be a little bit argumentative. We're fine. We have our rules of engagement, how we do stuff. But yeah, like if something sparks a bit of debate or comment, great. The worst thing is we work hard on something, we post it, and then it bombs, and that's fine. We learn something. But I'd much rather some people love it. Like the saying is, I think fence sitters don't buy. So if I had 10 people, I'd rather 5 love it and 5 hate it than 10 people be like, did you post? Didn't even see that. So great. Cheers.
Yeah. You know what that reminds me of? A few weeks ago, I finally saw the biopic of Elvis, and I don't know if you ever seen that, the one with oh god, what's his name?
The Baz Luhrmann one.
Something Butler. Yeah.
Tom Hanks is in it. I think I've seen it.
Tom Hanks is in it. What's the main guy's name? Something Butler. Ashton. I forget now. Anyway, extremely criminally attractive man is
handsome man.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Very handsome man who now speaks like Elvis and is trying to not speak like Elvis anymore. You know that story, right? He's literally doing speech coaching to reverse all the work he put in to speak like Elvis.
No way. No, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah. He's like, I can't not speak like this anymore. My tone is different. My internet. So I'm trying to revert back to how I used to speak. Apparently that's a thing. But anyway, so in the film, I love that the general or the colonel, like the character, he goes, right, we're going to print some badges that say I love Elvis. And also I printed some badges that say I hate Elvis. And I was like, oh my God, that is mastermind level of thinking. Because you got to profit from your enemies as well if you can, I suppose. But yeah, it's interesting. I saw a thing related to that in terms of social, which was a nice articulation, which was don't worry if some people are going, like on the topic of reposting it, don't worry if some people are going to see it twice. Focus if many more are going to get to see it the first time. And
So true.
that for me tracks with like it tracks with what we know about how brands grow, the whole light buyers thing. Like just, yeah, it feels much more grounded and frankly, much more sane as a way of managing a content program for a brand.
Well,
So
otherwise,
it
you
kind of,
basically need a content team that's so big to, you basically need a media agency, which is what HubSpot's play was, right? But
yeah,
they're a multi-billion-dollar company. They can buy a content team. I can't. Most teams can't.
exactly.
I'll tell you the other one that I think is quite clever. I mean, I see what they're doing, but
Yeah.
my two main platforms, probably LinkedIn, work-wise, and obviously a little bit of social and keeping contact with people, and then Reddit as a
Hmm.
user. And there's a very clear overlap of people that are on Reddit and LinkedIn, because I see a meme appear on Reddit and then I'm like, give about half an hour and it appears on LinkedIn. So in the same way, like in the same way that reposting your own content is fine, cross-posting by platforms, well, like there is a balance, of course. Like you don't want to see too
Of
many
course.
tweets on LinkedIn or vice versa. But do you remember this at the Olympics? I think there was a Turkish and a Korean target shooter, and the Korean had all the
Oh yeah.
gear, and the Turkish guy like looked like someone's uncle, just chilling. Saw that on Reddit, and I thought, that's probably going to be a meme about B2B. Log in the next day, like it's cool, it works, and I was happy to see it. But yeah, in the same way, right? Like smart, not
That's
work smart,
interesting.
not hard, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it does feel like with social, like you say, it's like the cost of failure is low. Even if you do that and it bombs, it's like, who cares? People forgot about it. Move on. Don't worry about it. So there's definitely a sense of unpreciousness, I guess, that should come a bit more with those sorts of roles. John, is there a quote or lyric that sums up how you feel about your life so far?
I quite like there's a quote that goes, life's ultimate challenge is about figuring out how to be yourself before you're too
Hmm.
old to care. And I think it's by Oprah Winfrey. And the reason I
Okay.
say that is that, when you're growing up, it's for me, becoming an adult was being comfortable with who I am, and kind of naturally you'll gravitate towards people who you share a life philosophy with, being respectful of those that you don't. That's fine. But, when you're younger, everyone is perhaps a bit more impressionable, unsure of who they are. There's a certain window where you get to kind of decide your beliefs and work on them before, to put it bluntly, you get too old and you don't care at all. And there's liberty in that, and I
Yes.
have a lot of respect for slightly older people who just do their own thing. But for me, like to my point so far, I suppose I'm in that window where like I think I know who I am and what I want to be, and I really try and work on that. And I don't get it right all the time. Before I know, like if I look at my parents, they're having a great time, but they just don't care. Trying to balance that sweet spot.
Yeah, that's nice. I quite like that qualifier of like, do it before it's too late, because it does feel like, yeah, especially, I mean, I'm doing some research into masculinity, and it's always interesting to me to speak to men who are interested in self-inquiry, not because they're going, oh my God, everything's wrong with masculinity, but it's just like getting a sense of who am I? How do I exist in this environment? What do I need to work on? Not because there's like self-hatred or whatever, or like repressed feelings, but just there's things that I still need to work on. What are they? What are the things I take pride in, and focus on that as well? But I find it interesting to see people like in their 30s, 40s, etc., thinking about this stuff, because it's never. I'd say not only it's never too late to think about it, but I would also say it's never too early, right? Because if there's things we can think about now that prevent us from, having habits that are more calcified in the future, then, why wouldn't you do it? It's a bit tougher. It means you need to work a bit harder to otherwise live a quite contented life. But I don't know, like, I don't know if you have kids, but like I have a daughter, and now I think real hard, like what sorts of values and masculine traits am I projecting into her without even realizing it, just by doing my day to day, which she is absorbing like I have no idea. And one day she'll go, that's what a man should feel like. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's never too late, but it's also never too early is the lesson that I take from that, especially for men, but not exclusively. But obviously, I can only speak to the male experience.
Totally. I don't have
What would you
kids,
like?
but I have.
What would you like? Go on.
I was going to say I have a nephew and a couple of nieces, and I think colors are really interesting. What signals do I give off that, like, what is a masculine color and what is a female color? If you see what I mean, because
Mm-hmm.
again,
Yes.
just because something is socially constructed doesn't mean it has value. But I think, like, if you go back long enough, they're actually the opposite. So, like blue is historically, I think, the color of the Virgin Mary. Red is like or pink is like the color of virility. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of years ago. But now,
Yes, yes.
as a construct, pink is kind of the girl's color and princess is for kids. And blue is like the boy's color. And I don't know, I probably subconsciously give off signals about that. I need to work on that. But, it's like you said, kind of when I'm around younger, more impressionable people, it's definitely something I do without realizing, definitely.
Well, I think we all do, right? And I would even go so far as to, there was a certain point, I think I'm a bit more okay with it now, but like I was almost going the other end and going, I don't want my daughter to have any pink things. But then that is equally a gendered construct, which is not necessarily helpful because now I'm creating a problem where, so the way I reconcile it is like, if she wants to have pink things, which she does, and she loves Peppa Pig, and she likes having princess-like things, absolutely fine. But it's like I give her options, or we give her options, me and my partner. So, for example, we always default to more earthy tones and stuff like that. She has clothes that sometimes people think she's a boy, but it just happens to be her favorite Stitch sweater or whatever. And it just happens to be blue. So she looks like a boy when she wears it, but it's just because it's her favorite shirt. It wasn't imposed or anything. But yeah, it's interesting. Like if you don't pick it up, it's very easy for you to just go, look, here's a pink thing. Do you want it? Rather than here's a menu of options. Some of them are pink, some of them are not. What do you prefer? But yeah, it's an interesting one, certainly. And like I say, I think men probably need to reflect a bit more on these things, not at the exclusion of other people, but it feels like there's a bit of a vacuum around masculinity that is interesting to look into as we try and
I agree.
Find out what is good masculinity versus not. What would you like to be remembered for?
I think a thing about the human mind is that negative news or emotions or fear of loss weighs much heavier than positive emotions or things that we gain. If something happens to you in your life, rather than thinking that I gained X, you're like, oh my God, I lost Y, even if X is better or they're equally the same. Ditto in any work environment you've been in, annoying as it is, we're all human, but kind of the negative vibes spread a lot quicker and faster and stronger than the positive ones. So I'd like to be remembered as a radiator rather than a mood hoover. So, I want to be remembered as someone positive who kind of brings the energy. From a work perspective, my philosophy or my mantra is always assume blame and delegate praise. So if you have a team, we were talking earlier about, you want people to try stuff and they're going to have to try 5 things because they don't know which one is going to work. And an experiment's only really a failure if you don't learn something. If you don't give people that psychological safety and that room to experiment, you're never going to hit on something that's right. So my job is basically, I'd like to be remembered as kind of some sort of professional ozone layer. So I kept the UV rays out from above and I let the sun shine in. You need the UV rays, right? We are there to make money. That's what a business does. But I don't want my team to feel that heat. Like if they do something well, I want everyone to know it was them. And if something needs correcting or changing, it's my team. I will handle it. But, I'll take kind of what's needed because I think that's really important in life. People have done it for me. I've been very thankful. I didn't even realize people were doing it at the time. And it's something I feel quite strongly about.
Yeah, that's great. That is really great. I love the metaphor and I love the saying. It's quite memorable, which I always like it when things are like pithy and memorable because that increases the chances of people actually doing them, easy to mind, easy to find. It's funny how it always comes back to Byron Sharp.
Always.
Okay, last few questions. Who in your industry deserves more attention?
So we all know about the game-changing kind of top 1% entrepreneurs who changed the world and have runaway successes and been multi-billion-dollar businesses. We've worked with over 1,300 businesses at Crowdcube, and we have all types of people doing all types of things from all types of backgrounds, raise money to pursue their idea. And basically every job I've done has been about working closely with entrepreneurs of all levels of success, and I think one thing that gets overlooked is how hard those people work. Now, everyone talks about that all the time, but when you work close up with people, you realize just how much certain people have put on the line to follow what they believe and just how much they're risking and just how much is on their shoulders. And, if they have a team, they need to be there first and foremost for the team, whilst also carrying the weight of their business. If they've taken out some sort of financing to cover the start of their business, if it's a tech business, if it's not a business, they are usually the ones that have put themselves on the line for it. So, I might put my house as a guarantee on this, or, kind of I'm personally liable. And just that it never stops. They're always thinking, they're always working. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit missed. We all celebrate the massive wins, but, everyone doing their own thing, I have massive respect for. And I think they deserve a little bit more attention over and above the platitudes and kind of like the Forbes articles and what you need to do to run your own business. Just how tough it is for people, I think. And, most startups, they will fail. That's what makes them exciting. You don't know, and you've got that kind of, buccaneering mindset. But I think I gets overlooked quite a lot from what I've seen anyway.
Does. I mean, it reminds me of certainly during lockdown. Well, not just during lockdown, but it coincided because we bought our place in 2019, so right before COVID hit. And I just remember, because I needed to rely on a bunch of tradespeople for various jobs that needed doing, like I just started respecting their way of thinking about business. That is almost the polar opposite of book smart business people. It's like they just, you could talk to them about business, but it doesn't feel like they studied business. They just practice it. And I've always liked that, that informality, and how they clearly have been successful running their own 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever sized company. But I don't know, they just they don't sound like business people. And that's what I respect about them. They're business people. They don't sound like business people.
So my partner's dad is so he fits all types of glass, cars, windows, bathrooms, ships and stuff like that. And he set up his own business in the 70s and, works basically all the time. And at the time, he wouldn't have been considered an entrepreneur, just have his own business. And, now it's kind of sexy and cool to be an entrepreneur. He never refers to himself like that and doesn't really like the term. He's like, well, I needed money. Exactly as you say, kind of, I saw a gap in the market, did my own thing. I'm happy. I have massive respect for those sorts of people.
Yeah. I feel like Check a Trade should do their version of the Forbes 30 over 30, but just for tradespeople, and almost
that would
riff
be cool.
on those codes of, it's like, because they need glorifying beyond just saying, he's a handyman or whatever. Right. Last few things. What's one thing you wish I had asked you?
You can probably tell that I'm quite a vain man by my hair, but everyone always knows me by my hair, right? And
you woke up like that.
I wish I woke up like that. And part of the package is, right, I used to have an amazing beard, but I got rid of it. But now I'm usually not clean shaven, but I usually got quite a tight beard. So I wish you'd asked me why I had such a terrible beard at the minute, so we could have addressed like how great my hair is. I'm growing it. I'm doing something fun. I'm doing something fun with our sales team for a company that we're launching on the platform, which involves my facial hair. I can't tell you anything else yet, but follow our LinkedIn and stay tuned. But that's why I wish you'd asked me, so we could have talked about my hair.
Does this involve the certain growing of a certain bit of your facial hair at a certain month of the year, which may be in 14 days' time?
No, I wish I'd been that clever. No, it's to do with to do with a. No, we tried that. We had great fun. Yeah, everyone had terrible facial hair when we did that. No, this is to do with one of the companies we have coming on the platform is related to my facial hair. That sounds abstract, but it makes sense when you see it.
Oh man, so, I'm curious. I'm curious about what's going to happen then.
I promised them if they sign the deal, which we pitched to, we did a joint pitch. So if you sign this, I will do what I am now in the process of preparing. They signed the deal, so now I've got this weird in between phase.
So now I got to do it.
No, I would do it. That's what I wish you'd asked.
Well, that's skin in the game, man. I respect that. Well, quite literally, actually, skin in the game. What's just terrible dad joke for you? What's one question you have for me?
So obviously, I like to do a little bit of research before I do these sorts of things, kind of who I'm talking to and a bit of their background. And I noticed, I think it might have been LinkedIn, that you said that you have a better memory for passwords than birthdays. So
yes,
I've got to ask, like, how many birthdays you've forgotten, what was the worst one, and how you made it up to that person.
I distinctly remember forgetting it was Valentine's until the morning of, it's the 14th of February. And so on a panic, I bought like the shittest looking pillow shaped like a heart. It was bad. It was very bad. So between that and forgetting my mother-in-law's birthday and being accused of not liking her because we were still I was like, do you know what? From now on, this was many, many years ago, right? If
Yeah.
if anything, I like to think I don't make a lot of the same mistakes twice. Maybe I do it like twice and then third time I fix it. Everything is in my calendar. If it's not in my calendar, it disappears from my memory. So I can't really say I've had like a disastrous forgetfulness, but I've experienced enough awkwardness to not want to do it again. That's
Fair
my
enough.
answer.
I have it with names
Um,
where I have great
yeah.
face recall, but I'm not great with names, and it's very embarrassing when someone else remembers your name and you're like,
Yeah, I have a bit of that as well. I'm like, oh, hey,
oh.
you? Yeah, how's it going? Yeah. Hey, man.
I can remember everything else.
Um,
It's just the name.
yeah, exactly. And then you got to find someone who also knows them to maybe get them to talk so that maybe a name gets dropped in the middle of a sentence so you can finally remember it. That's always good fun. John, you've been great. Thank you so much. For your last question, where can people learn more about you?
So the best place to learn more about me is probably on LinkedIn, as we said, is the main channel that I use. If not, we have a lovely office in Shoreditch, nice, cool period building. I'm always up for a strong black coffee and talking shop about marketing. So if anyone does want to talk to me about hair or marketing or coffee, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Always happy to meet new people.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. And for those of you watching or listening, thanks as well for hanging out with me and John Hills from Crowdcube. John, have a great
Awesome.
day.
Cheers, Rob.